Welcome to Martalks, the #1 podcast for e-commerce and marketing applications. Martalks is devoted to covering the latest technology developments that drive the global commerce ecosystem from advertising to last mile. Enjoy all of our content at rosensteingroup.com/martalks-podcast.
Welcome to Martalks. I'm your host, Daryl Rosenstein. Martalks is where we discuss contemporary issues in the composable e-commerce economy. And today we're joined by Eli Finkelshteyn, the founder of Constructor, the preeminent product discovery solutions firm that's in the Mach Alliance. And Eli is going to talk to us today about what you can find, what you can't find, why you should be looking for it, how you should be looking for it, how you will be looking for it, and, maybe where my keys are from my 1972 Volvo that I have not seen in forever. Eli, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I hope I'm helpful with the keys.
That's a long shot, but I thought I'd put it out there. Eli, search is something that's always fascinated me within e-commerce. We think about the kind of granddaddies of search, Yahoo and Alta Vista, and all those guys. But I mean, I've worked with quite a few search companies in my search practice, no pun intended, including Fast, Autonomy, Exely, Verity. We're going way back. We're going in the way back machine here. But, what on earth with at that time when you first started working this, Endica was still the kind of heavyweight. What was it that possessed you to start a startup when you were a humble data scientist? And what was it that really directed you to do a product discovery solution?
So my background is I was studying computational linguistics in university. I got kind of obsessed with languages and also data science at the same time. And that, long story short, led me into search because search, it turned out, had like every problem that you could imagine that you would want to work on as a computational linguist. Like you get everything from the really, really interesting like language specific problems, especially if you're dealing with multiple languages. But even if you're dealing with a single one, like there's still like the language understanding part of it is really interesting. And then on the other hand, and honestly, like even more importantly, you have all these really interesting data science problems that almost like bleed into psychology of like, when a given person is searching for something, what do they really mean by that? How do you figure that out? You really have to use statistics. And like, what is the goal? Like, how do you measure success? And you've got these like really interesting metrics definition problems as well. And so I fell in love with the problem space. I was doing it as a search engineer at both full-time at a company called Shutterstock and then afterwards at consulting. And I kept running into the same problem, which was that every time I would be building on top of the same sort of open source solutions. Back at that time, it was primarily Elasticsearch and Solr. And like these were great solutions, but they weren't specifically meant for e-commerce. They didn't natively take in this really, really valuable clickstream data that exists within e-commerce. It really gives you so much signal about what somebody actually wants. Things like add to carts, concepts like inventory, margins, things like that are important to the business. These are things that you really should be learning from. If like you've got a great product that was selling really well and then all of a sudden like the most popular sizes run out, what do? These are very, very specific e-commerce things. And so for me, it was like, I can either keep trying to hack that into these like one size fits all general solutions, or we can go and build something that really takes this stuff in as a first class citizen. And if we do that, like my bet, and we've been lucky enough that it's turned out well so far, was that we could just do a much better job in terms of getting the e-commerce business metrics that the sorts of companies that we work with, the Sephoras and the Under Armours of the world, and just be able to do that much better than anybody else in a way that was provable, where they could A/B test it. See, they're making so much more revenue with us than with someone else.
Well, I'm glad that you're trying to figure it out, because I'll tell you what, I'm still having issues when I want to get my 1980s winter freak on and do a search for a chartreuse muffler I mean, you wouldn't believe the results I get. It's like the search engines are having a fight to figure out what the most ridiculous representation of that is. Needless to say, it isn't what I've seen as yet, but any of you out there that are listening that do merchandise a chartreuse muffler, you'll have my email at the end of this.
I'm going to have to go test that search afterwards. I don't know anybody that sells a chartreuse muffler, but go on and journey.
There's companies that are they're going to insist that they do, and they're going to be sending me a coupon to get 2 for 1. I can guarantee it. And free shipping. Yes. Well, it's obviously clear in reading the press about Constructor, which has been amazingly positive. I mean, you've got some raving fans. You've got some raving fans that you are relentlessly focused on increasing the revenue for your clients. In fact, I know that the latest IDC Knowledge Discovery Report had Constructor as a leader, which is quite an accomplishment. That is a great analyst organization. They really do look for results. They interview those customers thoroughly. So well done there. But while that must have been great, certainly an ego boost for you and the team, a couple of chest bumps in the office. I also looked up some of the metrics that you guys have delivered in your case studies. And some of those were pretty darn impressive. Kind of some awe shocks. Wow. Can you share how you felt when you found out that, Petco was getting a 13% bump in conversion rates, or, Princess Auto? I don't know what exactly Princess Auto is, but they saw a 22% bump in conversions.
Princess Auto is a really great retailer in Canada. If you happen to be in Canada, you should check it out. They're wonderful, really wonderful people who work there also. But yeah, it felt really good. Like anytime that we can tell our customers that we're going to deliver something for them, and then we get to beat the amount that we told them that we were going to deliver, like that always feels really, really good. It feels like I can get excited about what I'm doing when I wake up in the morning. It also just means that like we had this hypothesis of what we would be able to do, and seeing that actually work out also just it makes me really, really happy. And for as long as we're doing this company, I'm going to keep trying to do that exact same thing for everybody that's willing to put their trust in me and willing to do business with us.
Well, your scientist was showing for a second there. You had a hypothesis, and you actually answered. I appreciate that. I don't think we've had a hypothesis yet in this show, so thank you for giving one. I hypothesize that this will be a good episode. We're just going to go there, and I hope I didn't jinx it. But one of the other things that I always look for in a firm is, what are the customers saying? I mean, I definitely, before I engage with a client, I'm looking at, what's their reputation score? What are they, what is their CSAT rating if they have one? And you guys definitely do a fabulous job of making your clients not just happy, but as we've discussed, realize real results, a serious ROI. And customer success is something you got, it's the linchpin, is to show users how that solution is impacting or would impact their business. Could you share a little bit about how Constructor's proof schedule process allows prospective clients to see that ROI using their own data, and walk us through how that process works?
Yeah, sure. So we have a general process for trying to ensure customer success, like the customer actually feels that they were successful with Constructor from the first time that they start talking to us all the way to when they're launched and they're live and they've been with us even for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. What we want to start with is aligning on what success looks like to them. That's, at least to me, the most important thing. If like, I think that the most important thing is, let's say, revenue, but for them, like, they're not actually trying to focus on revenue. They're trying to maybe focus on like profit, or maybe they're trying to focus on conversions or something like that. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what they think. And so having that conversation with them initially of like, what is that metric or that set of metrics that you're going to define success by? And how big of a lift do you need to see in them in order for you to feel successful if you install Constructor? And that's the very first step, because if we can't align on that, then like we're going to go in, they're going to install it. They're going to hope for one thing. Maybe we deliver that, or maybe we deliver something else. We don't really know what they want. And so like, I think that we would just wind up butting heads in that case. And we don't want to have that. We want to set the customer up as much for success as possible. The next step is trying to figure out a lightweight way of showing the customer that we're capable of doing that. And it's also showing ourselves, honestly, too, because if the customer says like, I need a 100% increase in revenue, like it's unlikely that installing a new search engine is going to get you that. And it's better for us to tell them like, that's probably not going to, I mean, maybe like if we get lucky, but it's probably not going to happen. Better for them to hear that before they install it than afterwards. So the proof schedule that you mentioned is this process for figuring out in a lightweight way without them expending a bunch of time, because they've got a bunch of different priorities that they could be putting time into, figuring out how much can we actually drive for them. So the way that it works is you send us a product catalog and you install 2 lines of JavaScript onto your website, which starts to collect your clickstream data. So what people are clicking on, what they're adding to cart, what they're purchasing, what they're scrolling past, et cetera, et cetera. And what we can do using that is we can start to look for places where we see holes, where we see gaps, places where maybe somebody is having a subpar experience, where, like I remember there was an example of somebody needing to search for Air Force Ones, and it would work well with the number 1, but it would not work well with it spelled ONES, or maybe it was the other way around. I forget which one. But you could see like one of those searches had this like really great conversion rate, and the other one had like a really bad conversion rate, and only some of the people reformulated. And so you look for examples like that, and you add all of them up where people could have a better experience if they had something like Constructor. And then you come with a business case and you say, okay, like here's what we think we could do for you. Here's what it's based off of, which is all these examples that we're finding on your site where we think that we could do better. We'll show you those as well. And then we say, is that exciting enough? And if it is, then great. Then we should move on to the next stage. And if not, like that's okay. We both learned something early before the customer needed to invest a bunch of time. And so in that case, we wouldn't be able to work with them, which is unfortunate, but hopefully they'll at least tell people still that they talk to, like, look, Constructor, those folks are not just going to sell you something that you don't need. It also bakes into one of the things that I'm proud of with the company is our retention rate, which over the last 3 years averaged out at 98.5%. So very, very few people that start using Constructor will not use Constructor anymore. And I think a lot of that is just ensuring like only the people where we can actually get success for them wind up using it. So that's the proof schedule. And then finally, after all of this, if the company decides to work with us, which I hope that they do, there's always a question of what have you done for me lately, which is a very fair question to ask. So it's letting them, if they want to prove out, do we actually get them the revenue lift that the proof schedule showed? Maybe they want to run an A/B test. That's okay. Maybe they want to do pre-post analysis. If they don't have the time or the expertise to run an A/B test, that's also okay. But then after they have it installed, like what kind of variations of our algorithm can we test for them as we're doing additional development, as we're improving, to be able to prove for them that Constructor in 2025 is doing more for them than Constructor was in 2024. And that was doing more than what Constructor was doing in 2023. So we don't need to only prove to them that we're the best solution at the time that they decide to use us, but that it's getting better and better and better over time, and we're constantly improving and we're constantly giving them more bang for their buck.
Wow. Upgrading service just automatically. Yeah, that's what initially attracted me to cloud native solutions. I mean, having an API-led cloud native microservice architecture solution, you not only can deliver a great experience out of the box, you can continually improve it with no disruption. There's no disruption. Just like, by the way, did you know that your slow-moving inventory has increased its flow-through rate on your site by 15% over the last year because it's showing up more. People are seeing it more that they weren't before. I mean, that's a great result, and customers need to be made aware of that. did you know how great we are? It's like, it's not bragging. It's like, do you know how great you're doing? Everybody needs that. Who wouldn't want to tell that to their boss? You know, that that product discovery solution I got, Constructor? Yeah, it just increased our conversion rate another 5% this quarter. It's like, I'd like to bring that up.
I think it's a matter of, yeah, like if I'm putting myself into the customer's shoes, like if I was there, I would want to make sure that I've got the best solution every single year. And if they make that job easier for me by telling me what they've done for me lately, then it makes my decision easier. So I'm trying to do the same for our customers.
Yeah, I think about the world of retail in general, and where you've got CEOs that are former merchants. In most cases, they're not e-commerce veterans, and they're just looking at e-commerce as a store, and they're not appreciating the fact that these investments are paying significantly more dividends than, say, remerchandising a point, their flagship point on Fifth Avenue. It's just legions of difference, but you got to make the client aware of that. And obviously, Constructor's doing a great job of turning those bold CIOs and CTOs that have chosen to go the composable route into heroes and make sure they have a story, their heroic journey to share with their peers. But let's divert here a little bit. This is something that has been very much on everyone's minds, is the rise of AI and AI powered shopping assistants. I mean, Perplexity being one. Perplexity now having a buy now button if you do a search with it, enabling you to purchase directly from your results. Amazon and Walmart wading into that as well with their search engines. How is Constructor optimized to integrate and complement these AI search agents? And are you bullish on that new technology?
Yeah, long story short, yes. I think it's important to have a balance here. Like I'm simultaneously bullish on the technology. And I try to have recognition that we're still in the Wild West, and the way that things look right now and these, initial shots that people are taking at it, this might not be exactly how things evolve over the next 5 years. So I'm bullish that things are going to change, and we're trying to do a lot of experimentation internally. So like for example, we have our own AI shopping assistant. We wanted to make sure as soon as that technology became available, that it wasn't just something that our customers needed to look over at, like the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world, and say like, oh, that's nice that they have that. I wish I had that. But we wanted to make it easy for them to be able to do that as well. And the nice thing is when customers integrate with us, we already have their product catalog. We already have their clickstream, because that happened by that proof schedule we were talking about before. So if they wanted to try something new like that, there's a very, very low commitment. There's not a whole lot of integration that needs to be done. It's basically just the UI, because we already have everything that we need in terms of data to build the algorithms ourselves. It's just making sure that they have a partner. Hopefully we can be that partner that is on the cutting edge of this stuff, that's willing to take those bets along with them. But then there's this also question of like, how do things evolve? And so we don't want to get married to just one idea of how this can work. So like, for example, our AI shopping assistant, you can use it to give long form queries. So you can go into it and say like, I'm going camping with my kids for the first time. They're 4 and 7. What do you recommend that I buy? And it'll actually understand that. But then also, like, can it generate questions and answers on a PDP? What are the typical questions that somebody might ask here, which we can figure out from reviews? And what are the typical, what are the best answers for those questions, which we can figure out largely from like the descriptions. Maybe there's something in other reviews. Maybe there's other data that we can get this stuff from. It's a different kind of discovery. Which one of those becomes more important in the future? Like, that's the thing that people are still testing. You can see the Walmarts and the Amazons and the Perplexities of the world testing this stuff. We just want to make sure that the tools that they have, our customers have access to the same or better.
I think about the evolution in this space. I mean, I remember first talking about the idea of clienteling with Rob Neibauer 20 years ago, and it was going to be a POS-based system that the shopping clerk was going to say, would you like socks with that? Essentially, if you were buying shoes or something to that effect. And now here we have AI essentially serving as your concierge and going directly to the brand to make a purchase, which has some marketers concerned because it essentially will obviate the need for much of the MarTech stack that has been built around the customer surveillance model of, clickstreams, where you're looking at every individual choice that a customer makes and trying to calculate down to the nth penny what ad drew people to the site, because the agent's going to be impervious to that. And the agent is going to learn what your preferences are, what your size are, what mood you're in, depending on how you ask a question, and go directly to that brand to make that purchase. It is the Wild West. It is the Wild West. I mean, so I love the fact that, you're thinking ahead and going, all right, we don't know how this is going to work out. We just got to be flexible. We got to make sure that our customers have the best assistant that they can have in this brand.
The agent thing, what it's worth, it's actually a good example because that agent also has clickstream. It also is going to be going and it just looks different from what a human has. But, it's also going into the website and it's looking for something and maybe it's trying out different searches and things like that. And it's giving you indication about what it likes and what it doesn't like. The big question in my head is do shoppers want an agent or do they want to evaluate these things themselves before buying? And on that question, I haven't really heard, at least right now, maybe it'll change in the future, but I haven't heard very many people being I want an agent to buy me a new pair of pants sight unseen. It's a lot of trust that you're putting into a thing that way. Maybe we get there eventually. We want to be prepared just in case it happens. But I think that brands that want to own that channel, that direct relationship to their customer, there's still a good reason to believe that that's going to be possible in the future. And they're not going to just have to talk to an agent all the time. But we'll see.
I mean, there's going to be shoppers and there's going to be people who don't want to shop. It's always the case. Maybe the agents will actually make it easy enough for people that weren't shoppers to actually look at choices that now they do want to look at choices. And conversely, folks that did enjoy going out shopping, it's oh, wow, I really can save a lot of time by having my agent do this. Well, it's exciting. It's exciting. Well, I used that word earlier, composable, and it is, in fact, the elephant in the room. I'm a huge fan of composable architectures because they allow a merchant to future-proof their stack by building it all out of the components that work best for them, the best content management system, product discovery, the best personalization engine, the best commerce platform, OMS, take your pick. And, they're all API-led, cloud-native, microservice architecture. So if a better one comes out, if somebody isn't as committed to continually improving their experience as another vendor in that category, they can swap it out quickly, easily, couple of weeks, couple of months, tops. So composable architectures have obviously been gaining traction in e-commerce, but much faster in Europe than in the United States. Here in the United States, I would have to say adoption has been slow. Why do you think that is? And how does Constructor's composable features help clients transition more easily to that model?
Yeah, so I think part of it comes down to the definition of composable.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
I think when you look at a lot of the really successful companies right now, many wouldn't describe them as composable as a company, but then they also have composable solutions like Shopify and Salesforce are great examples of that. On the flip side, there are pure composable companies that are also fantastic. I think that composable, with anything, it's not great to treat. With any technology, at least, it's not great to treat it as a religion where it's you have to have it or you don't. It's a tool. We have great partners that would traditionally be described as composable. We have great partners that would traditionally be described not as composable. For us, we think of it as a tool internally for what Constructor is. For product discovery, I personally think it makes a lot of sense because product discovery is something that you would fit into an existing stack that you already have. You can install it as part of a new one, but like a lot of the time when we're coming in, it's to fit into an existing stack that they already have. And what they're looking for is they're looking for a little bit more revenue out of the existing product discovery platforms that they have. They want to swap that out and get more revenue. For that, I think composable is the very best thing because you can swap us out. Hopefully we can do a really great job for you. But theoretically, if we can't, like you kind of have like, the gun to our head of like either do this or it's composable so you can very easily swap something else out. And I think that's a good thing. Like I think that puts us into, or any vendor, it puts them into the right mindset, which is like you have to earn this business every single day that you're working with them. And if you don't, then it's easy for them to leave. You're not going to be able to stick around just because you're sticky or because it's difficult to pull out or because you're a monolith. You have to earn the business. I think that's better for the customer. And I think it's better for us as well because it gives longevity to the company. Like we don't want to stick around just because the customer has to keep us. We want to stick around because we're doing a good job for them. We want them to tell us if we're not doing a good job for them because we should fix that immediately.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to have a customer just because they have lack of options. I mean, in my biz, they definitely have plenty, which is, it's not an issue, but I think I'd feel a little guilt. But when we look at the adoption of Constructor in particular, you've had multi-billion-dollar clients. They implement Constructor not quite in a matter of weeks. I think you do. It does take a month, but I think you might have a couple of examples where it's been weeks. And then they realize a 5, 10, 15% jump in conversions. That's probably...
It's funny, actually. Just now that you're mentioning, our record is currently 9 days. I'm saying because we had a recent one that did it in that period of time.
9 days.
We were all celebrating a high five. The previous record was 10, and so we were like, can they beat it? And yeah, anyways, neither here nor there. It's fine if they take longer also, but that one just made me really happy.
But it's just, I mean, it's mind-blowingly easy comparatively. Companies think of the word replatform anything, and it's just like they run for cover, and they think about their capital that they're going to have to spend to get a project online. And now we've got an entire suite of solutions to make their commerce stack faster and more productive and more profitable than it's ever been, and it's easier than it's ever been to make that transition. I think that it's having an experience with Constructor probably makes a client more likely to pursue the rest of the stack to improve their digital experience for their customers than it was ever possible, because they can pick it, they can strangle the fig. Which again, when I think about composable, I'm thinking about that API-led, cloud-native, microservice architecture, and that's kind of what I'm sticking to that. There's companies that have decoupled some of their functionalities, but it's still pretty big and furry. But you got Constructor replacing mega applications like Endeca or Solr. Again, in a week, especially in a week. Like, wow, okay.
Yeah, but
you mentioned.
I think just to like what you were saying before is also just absolutely fair. Like when we're replacing something within a week, very often that's enabled by the technology that they already have. Like they already have like a great composable piece of software, Like you can do that sort of stuff with some of the companies I mentioned beforehand. You can also do that with like the commerce tools and the big commerces of the world, and those folks are fantastic. It's composable to me. It's a tool. It's a tool. It's using it where you need it, and a lot of the time, that's what enables you to be able to install these things so quickly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, installing something that big with that much of an impact in 9 days is huge. Can you share another kind of your favorite success story where Constructor's discovery platform significantly improved a customer's business metrics or their customer experience?
There are a few. At this point, there are a few. We've been through something like 80. No, sorry, that's all. It's more like 90 A/B tests at this point with companies that they were installing. So like I'll give you two. One of them I can mention the name of the company. The other one it just finished. It's just fresh, and I don't think I've got marketing right, so I can't mention the name of the company. But the first one is one of our first customers was a company called Sephora, and those folks are fantastic. We've had the pleasure of working with them, I think, for something like 5-6 years now, or something like that. But they've got a really strong testing culture. And so they started off by installing just a very small piece of Constructor. They said, we'll give you a shot after going through the proof schedule, but that shot was only on their iOS app and only in the United States and only for search. So they weren't using our browse or our recommendations or any of our other technology at first. And we won that A/B test. And then afterwards, they said, okay, cool. Like, you've proved it out. Now we want to test another part of you. Like, we know that you can do this on iOS. Can you do it on desktop and Android as well? And so they did that test, and we won that as well. And they were like, okay, cool. We'll install it there too. Can you do other languages? We've got a French site for Canada, French Canada. So they tested us for French as well. And we did that.
Merveilleux.
That's two. I'm sorry?
Merveilleux.
Exactly. I don't know what that means, but hopefully don't think that. But anyway, so they did that test, and then eventually they installed us for recommendations the same way, and they started using us for email recommendations even. But with each of these things, it was always after a test. And so that was just an incredibly fulfilling and like nice experience for us, where like it was hard work, right? We needed to do all these different tests. The tests were not zero work. But it really proved out that every single part of the platform individually, like it wasn't just like a, mixed thing. It was every single part of the platform individually was able to earn its place. That made me really happy. There was another one that just finished recently. This is one I don't remember if I can use the name, but this is a company where they're a two-sided marketplace. They would sell used clothing. And so there they had these doubts initially about us. They were like, can the clickstream approach work even when you only have one of every single item that you sell? Right? Because like the, sweater or whatever that Ellie is wearing right now, like there's only one of this sweater, even if it's made by whatever company, like there's only one in this quality that I'm selling right now. And so it's difficult to compare that to other ones. They also set a pretty high benchmark for it. They said, we're only going to be able to declare success on this thing if we get to at least a 5.5% increase in search conversion rate, specifically only on search. And the technology that they had done quite a bit of work on it. It was an in-house team that had built on top of Elasticsearch. But then they A/B tested it, and we surpassed their benchmark. But then we also added additional AOV on top of it. And then we also added additional RPV on the browse side. And so it was just this like knock out of the park success from when their CFO was looking at it afterwards. And they went to 100% with us much faster than they expected to. And that felt really, really good. So we were all high-fiving internally about that as well.
Outstanding. So that was that was on a re-commerce site.
That was on a re-commerce site, exactly.
Wow. That's a fascinating issue, because again, you go to a company, you go to a site, and I'm an avid real shopper. Just I go back with some of the founders of the firm, but I think that the ability to do a search where you're looking for a very specific piece of whatever and be served up results of other things that are approximate enough that you're increasing your AOV with that's pretty spectacular. Because you're going for a very specific thing. It's like, I want that Birkin bag. I want that. Well, I mean, I don't have any Birkin bags. If I did have purses, I would want a Birkin bag, even though they are $3,000 or $4,000 on the secondhand market, because Hermès just does a fantastic job, as does Sephora. I mean, Sephora's got a fantastic reputation. That's a very progressive technology experimenting organization. Anybody who I've come in contact with from that organization is a rabid technologist and about taking risks. And I think that more retailers should pay attention to what they've done, because they could save a lot of time and effort if they watched and listens.
I think so. I'm a big fan of those folks. A lot of very good, very people over there.
I like the anthropology team too. Those guys are spot on. They try out everything and they know how to figure it out pretty quick. Well, we've talked about some of the AI that Constructor's leaned into since its inception. Do you see replacing some of the things that humans would traditionally do? I mean, for instance, merchandising, for example, does it still have a place in the AI future?
So at least my opinion on this is absolutely, because I think that there's this balance within commerce in general of art and science. On the one hand, there's a science where you're looking at that clickstream data, and for a human to do all those calculations when a computer can do them much, much faster, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so like the things that you get out of it, like in the old world, for example, you would have merchandisers, and this was never their job originally, but people would have them going in and like putting in like synonyms, because they were using these old keyword based search engines like Endeca that you had mentioned, or Solr or Elasticsearch, or they'd be like manually correcting misspellings or something like that, because those things were built as a one size fits all, and like maybe they didn't have a concept of how people would typically misspell. That sort of stuff, like that menial work, which never should have been part of merchandising in the first place. Like, I don't think humans ever should have been doing that in the first place. And I think it's a brighter, better world if they don't have to. On the flip side, you have the art of it. So like, I remember I was reading, this tells you how much of a nerd I am. I was reading the autobiography.
Guilty.
I'm sorry?
Guilty.
There you go. I was reading the autobiography of Sam Walton, who founded Walmart, and he had this example in there where this is like in the early days of Walmart, but they needed to sell a lot of car wash, like car wash fluids and soap and stuff like that, and so they took a pickup truck and they drove it into the store and they filled it up with these things, and like it made this like really, really great display. And that's not something that I would ever trust AI to come up with. Like, that's a very human thing to come up with. That's more of like the art part of it. And it was a great idea. Like you read the autobiography, and it's like that stuff actually sold out much faster than if it had been on a shelf. That's the sort of stuff where I want to enable merchandisers to have time to do the art, the creativity, the more strategic stuff. And the only way that they'll have time to do it is if we can take the menial labor off of their plates. So that's kind of how I see the division.
That's very reassuring, for the artists out there, for the creators out there, that right now AI is good at replicating and automating very, very menial tasks, and we should lean into that and, spend more time doing the things that bring us joy, which is being creators, being innovators, and bringing innovation to our stores.
Well, it depends to bring this joy, but I think it's also important. Like, I don't know, if you imagine a world where like everything that you read is written by ChatGPT, like that's a really sad world, right? Like, I don't think anybody wants that world. And so it's the same thing with commerce. Like, if every e-commerce site looks exactly the same because it's all powered, like it's all purely AI and it doesn't have any human-driven merchandising in there, like that's not going to be a whole lot of fun. I don't think anybody wants that. So I don't think that we're going to get there. I think the place that we get to, which is a much better place, is let AI do the menial stuff, the stuff that an AI is going to be better at, and let humans do the strategic, the artistic, the creative stuff that really helps define the brand, helps define the retailer, who they are.
Well, I'm hoping that there isn't an AI-based podcast out there that's going to listen to this and go, well, I think I could write some great copy. That would scare me. That would scare me. Well, let's move on to something that you and I share, which is customers. You're in a sales cycle with a customer. They get a competing bid from a competitor that's dramatically lower than theirs, and you've got to then lean back into your ROI story. For me as an executive recruiter, I talk about things like tenure. My tenures tend to be 40 to 60% longer for the people that I place than people that are hired in that role, or time to productivity. My folks tend to transact deals 30 to 60% faster than folks that are hired traditionally. I mean, you've got to lean into your own ROI story on that. How do you, when a customer is looking at a competing bid, convey your value to clients who might initially focus on cost rather than ROI?
I think it's a hard question. But I think there's two parts to it. So one of them is we need to, if I sound like a broken record with anything, it's with the word empathy, just because I think it's just so important in general. But like part of it is, we need to try to get onto the same side of the table as the customer. And if I'm putting myself into the customer's shoes, if somebody came to me and they said, let's say I'm like the CIO or something like that, and they said, you can either get one search solution and you're going to pay, let's say, I'm just going to use like a dumb number, but like, let's say $1 for it and you get, $10 back. Like, is that a good deal? Like, well, yeah, of course. Like, I'd love to trade $1 for $10. Why would I possibly not want to do? Let's say there's another one that you could get where you trade $2 and you get $20 back or $30 back. Is one of those a better trade? I'd be like, well, yeah, like I want to try to get scale. If I could trade $1 for $10 or $2 for $20 or for $30, whatever it is, like anytime that I can get a better return on $1 than $1, like that's a worthwhile thing for me to do. And so when you're looking at our technology, it's like there are things that we can do where they're more expensive to train. For example, let's say like a transformer, which I won't go too much into, but it's what the T in ChatGPT stands for. It's this really powerful thing for helping understand what people mean when they're searching. But it's also more expensive to train than the older generation of things people would have used for vector search. And it's like, okay, like, is that $1 that's spent on a transformer worth it on top of whatever? It's like, well, if it's giving you much more than $1 back, then probably it is. And so this is the thing that we really need to help our customers understand from their perspective. Like, I get it that it's hard. Like, everybody is trying to tell them like, oh, I'm going to make you so much more money. And how do you trust one of these versus the other? And so that gets back to the proof methodology that we were talking about before. I don't think that you should trust like me or, anybody within our space just by the words that they're saying. Transparently, like that's better for me because I know I'm not a very good salesperson. So if it's just trusting, whatever, that like somebody's going to be able to outsell me. I'm just like, make them prove it. Like there is a proof methodology for this, whether it's a proof schedule or something else, like you can decide on it, but make them prove it. Like if they can prove to you that that's the trade that you're making, then great. Then you probably want to make that trade. Like you want to try to trade every single dollar that you can for more than $1 because that's always a worthwhile trade. We just need to prove to you that that's the case. That's the first half of it. The second half of it is, and this is a decision that like I've had investors previously become upset at me about, but I think it's the right one. I want to do it for as long as possible. Is our pricing is more straightforward than our competitors. So if you look at it, it's just a flat rate. Like what we do after you go through the proof schedule is we have enough data to basically be able to say like, here is your price. And regardless of what happens to your traffic, regardless of what happens to your product catalog, anything like that, like for the life of the contract, this is what you're going to pay. Don't do anything crazy, please. Like, don't just start sending me like random traffic from like another site or something, but like, this is it. And because of that, like we don't charge customers more than they expect. It's that hard conversation up front, but it's not a hard conversation every month when they're getting some additional bill they weren't expecting. And when you compare that to other folks, like we have had a number of customers, for example, come over from another competitor whose name I won't mention, but part of the reason was it looked cheap. And then they realized that they were also getting charged per query and that bot traffic was included in that. And they had all of this bot traffic that they weren't expecting at first that all of a sudden brought up the expected traffic that the estimation of the contract was initially based on way more. So they wound up paying 2-3 times as much. And they were like, okay, now I don't want to be here anymore. The reason I started doing this at first was to save cost, and that actually saving cost. The unfortunate thing for us is like that sort of thing will oftentimes win an initial deal against us.
Mm-hmm.
But the nice thing is that a lot of those customers afterwards, they'll come back, and it is painful to lose those deals eventually, but like, I think that it's still right to be transparent with the pricing. I think it's better to do it that way. And I think that's the thing that enables us to have a better retention rate. And like eventually it'll build on itself. So I'm still happy to hear it.
Well, I think that any, like a Constructor is OpEx versus CapEx as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there you are. You're essentially retiring a capital debt with the solution.
That's what we're trying to do. I know we're a little bit over here. Unfortunately, I'm going to need to run in a second here. Maybe one last question, if it's all right.
Yeah. Well, as someone who spent 25 years helping startups find the right talent, I'm always fascinated by that team building process. And, what were your biggest challenges when you were hiring your first executive team? And, what qualities have proven out for you as being just essential and putting people that have been successful with you head and shoulders over the folks that haven't?
The initial challenges, there were a lot. I mean, there still are, but if I needed to put it into two buckets, I'd say one of them is hiring for people that are going to be filling a role that I've never done myself. So if I'm trying to interview for an engineer, like for that stuff, we had a really good track rate at the very beginning of the company, like, because I'd done it before. So I had an unfair advantage. But then if it's like going and hiring like our first head of marketing or our first head of sales, those were much more challenging to do because it's me trying to evaluate something that I don't understand nearly as well as the person that I'm talking to. And that's true for pretty much every single person that I'd be interviewing. So that was half of it. And the other half, the main bucket, was being willing to disagree with people where incredibly smart people that had done it before, but where their advice just didn't match the sort of company that we were trying to build. So like we had many smart people that would give us advice, investors that would give us advice who I respect a whole ton, who had done it before. And so like on paper, like their opinion should matter much more than mine. But they weren't trying to build the same company that we're trying to build. And I think every company is unique. And this, the thing that works at one company might not work at another one. And realizing that, and then also being willing to disagree with them and say, thank you very much for the advice. Like we still really appreciate it. Or, I still definitely want to hear it. But if there's a specific reason for why that advice might not work out for Constructor specifically, being willing to stand up and say like, thank you for the advice, I'm going to do something else. Those are the things that made it difficult. The things that I think have stood out as being some of the most important attributes of people that work here. And again, this is just for us. It doesn't mean this is the right thing for everybody. I mean, for every company, but we really like people that are curious. Curious people tend to figure things out. We like people that figure things out. We have a really good track record. And this sounds obvious, but I think with most with a lot of companies, it's maybe not as high on the list as for us. Is we want to hire people that are genuinely good people. Maybe that salesperson that you hire that isn't willing to like hoodwink a customer, like they might not make as much revenue for the company, but that's a trade-off that we're willing to make. Like we would prefer to have the good person because it just lets everybody, it makes it so much easier for everybody else within the company to also be a good person. When they know that people are going to be good to them, it enables them to bring out the best parts of themselves. So that's turned out to be really good for us also. Introspective people, where the way that when they're looking at like who they are and where they are within their careers matches the way that we see them, where that match exists, there's just a much higher probability that the thing is going to work out. Like if you hire somebody that's amazing, let's say they're like here, but they see themselves as even higher than that, it's going to be difficult to come to grips on like what that person's role is going to be and what it should be and how fast they get that promotion and things like that. And you're setting yourself up for failure. because that person might be really, really smart, but they might not be a good fit here. They might try to bite off more than you think that they can chew. Or, they might just not be happy with the position and the responsibility that they have. And so finding people where your view of them is aligned with their introspective view of themselves. I think empathy that we talked about before, like that's incredibly important, that the person is constantly putting themselves into the shoes of the people that they're interacting with. It's especially important with customers. Like you have to do that with customers. Otherwise you're not going to get success with them, and they're not going to be happy with what we're doing for them. But you also have to do that with coworkers. You have to do that with the people that you're working alongside, with other vendors that we use. And then finally, grit and hard work. Like I just think there's no substitute for grit and hard work, especially with a rapidly growing company. I don't know if startup is still the right word for us. Probably it is, but there's just no substitute for hard work. And either you're willing to do it or you're not. And we want to hire the people that are.
Well, kudos to you for, I wouldn't term it standing up to your investors when.
No, I think our investors are wonderful. I don't want to give the wrong idea or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that at all. What I was going to say is that they realize that they don't know it all. They can offer you their advice, but the reason they invest in you in the first place is because they believe in your vision. And you being true to that vision, and when it contradicts some of their advice, is awkward. It's awkward at the beginning. It's not an easy thing to say. I'm going to go a different direction than what you, who have been out in the world and done things similar to what I'm doing right now, are telling me to do. But it's that fidelity to your vision that excites them. That they love it when they see it. Obviously, when it works. But it's also what your team is really. It's what your team really rallies around. It's like, wow, our CEO is in charge, and they have a vision, and they're maintaining their fidelity to that and to us and to who we are. But I have to ask you one more question before we go, because it just naturally comes into that. I mean, leadership plays a huge role in recruitment and culture, and you've got a leadership style, Ellie, and it's influenced Constructor's ability to attract and retain some great people. What's your secret sauce, man?
I don't know.
And you can say empathy one more time. I'm just going to let you say it one more time, and then we're retiring it.
Sure. One last time. Empathy, I do think, is incredibly important with leadership and just about everything that we do. I do, unfortunately, if I needed to go quickly, like I think humility about the things that I don't know. Like I'm going to need to make decisions on them anyways, but being humble enough to know that I don't know the right answers always. And being honest about that with people also. Like when it's a hypothesis, it's not something that I know for sure. I think it's important to lead from the front. And I don't know that everybody would agree with that. I think there are lots of great leaders that don't do that, and that works for them. At least for me, like I think that it's important for my leadership style to not just tell people to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do, but to be willing to do it myself also. Like maybe not every time, maybe I can't do that quite as much anymore because my time is a little bit more pulled in all directions. But like if I want somebody to do something and I'm not willing to do it myself and I've never done it myself, like it's just, I don't know, that feels kind of crummy for me to tell somebody to do it anyways.
Thanks for listening to Martalks, the #1 podcast for e-commerce and marketing applications. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and while you're at it, leave a rating and review. To find out more about how the Rosenstein Group can help you find the right leaders for your client development teams in MarTech and e-commerce, please visit our website at rosensteingroup.com.